On. Hey, Marti, I love to connect with you. How are you today?
I'm really great, Andre. It's so good to be with you. It's really good.
Yeah,
Thanks for
just had a few seconds discussing a few things about genius, and I hope you will go into that one. This is my Heroes series. I'm so happy to be here with you. Tell me about you. How's your day and about your background?
Yes, I have a really interesting background. You know, it's interesting. People ask me, you know, how are things where you are? And I have a few acres out in the countryside in California. And so it's very peaceful here and not very much happens. Right. So people say, oh, what's up? And I say, I don't know, nothing really. It's like, there's a new flower in the garden. Maybe it's sort of, but then they ask me about my work. And I tell people that I work with consciousness. And I work with the indigenous wisdom traditions, older than the meditative traditions. So these are the original wisdom traditions. And I teach entrepreneurs and leaders and change makers what I call the technologies of consciousness, which is really how human awareness works in the universe and how to connect to the world via awareness. And there are some very deep principles that have to do with everything we're looking for, with membership, with love, with the creation of value and well-being. And so it's very intricate training, and it sounds very lofty when I describe it and maybe a little mysterious. And it's really different from this sort of quiet place I live where it doesn't look like much is happening, because consciousness is like that. It's always on the move, it's always evolving, but you can't see it. So like, what is this? And Marti, how did you get to this? So I come from a short but illustrious line of scientists. And so when it came time for me to go to university, the only thing I knew was science. So I went to Harvard and I signed up for biochemistry. So sure, why not? You know, and I didn't really think about the fact that my dad was pretty famous and I was carrying a last name. You know how that is when you have a famous last name. So I didn't really enjoy my experience at Harvard because people looked at me and they saw my dad and they either loved him or hated him. And so I was like, what is this? I don't want to carry this. And so in my senior year, I decided that I wasn't going to continue in science. I just couldn't do it. So I turned around and I took a graphic design course at the Carpenter Center at Harvard. And there's a Japanese guy who is a wonderful designer. And he'd been in the States for a long time, but was very, very Japanese and still had a heavy, beautiful accent. And I go to him and I'm very nervous. And I say, I don't know if I can get into his course. So I'm going to ask for permission. Can I take your course? And I go, oh my God, I've only done science, right? And so I'm stumbling along, and I finally basically close my mouth. I quit babbling at him. And he looks at me and he nods his head. He's holding his hands in this prayer position like this. He said, and I'm quoting, he said, "Ah, so. All you need is to want."
How powerful.
Whoa, my first mentor, this man. And so I did a little graphic design and I really liked it. And somehow with this skinny little portfolio I had from his class, I got into Yale Design School. So I went from science into graphic design. So this is my graduate work, was at Yale in graphic design. And I had a design business in San Francisco for 20 years. And I didn't realize how important that was until I had my midlife crisis and quit my design business and went off to do some energy healing, because that's what we do in California, right? And so this Scottish fellow who taught visionary craniosacral work, I was going to him for sessions for my own healing, and he said to me one day, he said, "Well, why don't you take courses with me?" And I said, well, I'm a graphic designer, right? And so finally I did. I took a course with him, and somehow that very first day in an intro course, he and I both realized that somehow I already knew how to do the work. I understood something about energy. And later, partly I realized that this was due to my design education, because design is the process of making information visible. And a really good designer isn't working with form. A really good designer is working with energy and energizing spaces on a page or in a three-dimensional space. And I didn't realize this till much later. But anyway, so I started learning craniosacral work. I taught for this guy. I developed my own program. And here comes the crazy sort of Hogwartsian part of my story, is while I was teaching cranial work, one of my students said, well, Marty, how do you know all these things? And they were talking about the things I could see energetically. And I said, I don't know, let's do a visionary skills course. And I had never uttered the words visionary skills in my life. So I just announced it and I created a course, and it became actually the foundation of the big training program that I have now. So during these years where I'm teaching cranial work, I'm teaching visionary skills, I received in the mail, I'm going to date myself now, this is really before email became the thing. It was like printed on paper, remember that? It's like
I remember.
Yeah. I received invitations to work with Indigenous elders on 3 different continents, 3 separate invitations. And I don't know where they came from. I don't know how they found me, but I wasn't doing that much work and it all looked really cool. So, so I said yes to all of it. Like, why not, right? And so within a year, I had my first levels of initiation into Indigenous cultures, and I just kept going from there. So I developed my training program. I developed my understanding of consciousness. Along the way, I realized that what I do with consciousness, we need to bring it to business. It's not for I don't want to insult anybody, but it's really not for shaman wannabes alone. This is the stuff of life. This is what the modern world actually needs. And so I developed the big program I have now, and every year it evolves a bit, but that's a kind of an encapsulation of how I got to doing what I do now.
This is exciting. I've got goosebumps. I feel a lot of energy on me since we started talking.
It's good.
So why do they come to you? Is this because they are so disconnected from this, what we call consciousness? Because it can't really be, but I think somehow we distorted our little world here on planet Earth and we just lost it. Or let's say most of the people lost it. Is that why they come to you, to find themselves? Or help me, teach me?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Most of the people have lost it. You know, over the last 2,000 years or so, we have been hell-bent on losing it. We've really shifted how we use consciousness and how we use awareness. So, so the thing is that my work is really, really challenging. What I offer people is very challenging. So somebody who comes to me who feels too lost might not be ready for the work. Usually the people who find me have tried everything else and they know there's yet something they haven't discovered. They've tried the workshops, they've done some shamanic program, they've done the energy thing and the meditating thing, and they still know there's something missing. They know it, they need it, they don't know where to turn, they don't know what to call it. And they're also generally people who have an idea of what they want to give into the world. They have a creative urge. They have a sense of how communities can be better, or business can be better, or families can be better, or something like that, or our ecology could be better. So they're a little bit driven, they're hungry. In a sense, most people who come to me, the first thing they say after a session or two in the training, they say, oh my God, I feel like I have come home to myself at last.
I love that. It feels like that Neo popped into my mind from the Matrix when they got this splinter in their mind that something is not aligned, something is missing, but they can't kind of pronounce it. They can't grab it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no language or anything to grab onto, but they know it's there. Yeah, it's an experience. Yeah. One of the things that I think has happened to Western consciousness is that we've become so dependent on language and thought process that we seek definitions instead of experience.
Wow.
And we can't really tell that we're thinking instead of experiencing.
Yeah, I did spend years along teachers, and he kept telling me that, has to come from the heart, and don't worry about the words. And I thought, this guy is completely gone. And it took me, a good 5-10 years before I started to learn or grow up to it, to realize what is he going on about.
Yeah. Yeah. If we don't get this understanding of experience when we're little kids, it's very difficult as adults to unlock our awareness and step back into feeling life instead of thinking and controlling life. It's a very, very big piece.
And your approach, is it through meditation? Is that how you approach this, or how do you teach exercises?
Yeah, I warn people when they first come to me, if they want to work with me, we have a long conversation and I ask, do you meditate? And if anybody says, oh yeah, I really depend on my meditation, I warn them that they may have to unlearn some things that they think they know. I have some very fierce things to say about meditation, but I'm going to hold on those for a moment. What we're after in the training is the very, very first thing that we do is to change how we use awareness. And so, of course, that's very hard to understand. The English language is a little fuzzy when we're talking about consciousness and energy and all that stuff. So most of the time, most people, so for whoever's going to listen to this, bear with me because I'm going to make some big generalizations. So most of the time, most people are in a state that I call self-referential. In other words, their awareness keeps coming back to self. So if my neighbor comes over and acts like an idiot, I'm going to refer that to myself. And I might end up feeling, I'm very likely to end up feeling that my neighbor is acting like an idiot toward me. It has something to do with me, right? That's that self-referential state. Yeah. Or the world isn't looking so good, so, oh my God, I am so impacted because the world isn't looking so good. I can't do anything. There's a war. Oh dear, right? That self-referential state. So that means awareness is not on the world, awareness is on the self. And that's a level that I very loosely call the ego level of consciousness.
Yeah.
And we're not trying to get rid of the ego. You do not get rid of yourself. You have to find your own identity. You have to find yourself and know yourself. But the only way we can do that in a way that's sustainable is to move awareness off the ego into the world, to connect with the world and then learn from the world. Now, if our awareness is just with our ego level of consciousness, we don't realize it, but we end up asking ourselves, what is the answer to all the questions? And the self doesn't have those answers. All of it comes from the world. Everything inside us has come from outside of us. So if we're not aware of that connection and aware of what's being given into us, life is really hard.
I get it, right? Because the answers are in the field of the morphogenetic field, or however they call this, but it is there, and people just seem to have lost that connection.
Exactly. And we're not born knowing how to make that connection, right? We're born knowing how to bond, because as an infant, if we don't bond, we aren't going to survive.
Yes.
Right. And so the first thing we learn is bonding like this to another human.
Yes, so true. And I realized that when my children were small, I remember they did not have their own little identity, especially not drawn at the body.
Right.
And I remember my child has had this expanded awareness. I think he thought mom was me, which is true,
You're right.
and everything else is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's an interesting kind of complex thing because when we're infants, I was just sort of reviewing what I just said. We bond. So we look for mother figure, father figure, and hopefully we have a decent one. So we know we're supported. But the other thing about a human being in infancy is language is not yet present. So an infant is actually learning from the world, left, right, and center. How do you learn to walk? You learn to walk by getting feedback from the floor.
Yeah.
You don't learn to walk by thinking it inside your head. You get feedback from your environment. You learn how to pick up your little sippy cup of milk and find your mouth by getting feedback from the world, right? And before we have language, we're learning at least 10,000 times faster than after we develop language. We have to really slow down to learn language. Yeah. So if we were quote unquote indigenous and we have our beautiful little babies and we know they're learning from the world, we're going to put them in environments where they will actually soak up the world. We're going to help them learn from the world. And as they gain a little bit of personality and they gain language, we would keep them in relationship with the world. We would teach them the greater powers of the wind and the weathers and the earth and the sun and the stars and the moon. We would teach them how to be in relationship with that. So imagine if we could have grown up being in relation with the world, knowing ourselves as a member of the world, not just our families, right?
Wonderful.
Knowing ourselves, in membership, not being told, well, you're going to have to go out in the world and make it on your own. Not connected.
So you bring that back, that kind of awareness of, well, I'm a part of a bigger whole or a bigger fabric of reality.
Yes. Yeah. And it's via experience. I can talk about this stuff and define it and draw diagrams and all that stuff. But until somebody in the training experiences the world speaking into them, none of this means anything. And so we're talking about these very lofty things, and we're talking about consciousness with a capital C, the big thing. But we start with tiny little experiences. Can you go outside and put your awareness on nature and experience it without thinking?
Ooh,
no
that's
story.
A big one.
That is the big one. That is the ultimate initial exercise in all indigenous training.
Wow. And have you just give us maybe one more specific exercise that is really kind of hits their head hard when they come to study with you? What would be another exercise where you really bring that awareness back?
Well, there's a number of them. That one that I just mentioned, I'll just say one more thing about it. It's in indigenous cultures, it's you're sent out into nature to find a spot that resonates with you, that feels good. And your job is to sit in that spot and with all of your senses, experience your entire surroundings for like 24 hours at a time. That's the indigenous version. For a Western person, they can barely make it 20 minutes.
I love that. I love that.
But it's brilliant training. No thinking, pure sensory experience until you learn how to do it. So that's one thing. Another thing that we do is we call it gathering energy. So it's very important to gather earth energy. And how do we do that? The traditional way is to breathe in earth energy. So a Western person is going to say, well, how would I know it's earth energy? What am I going to do? So we start with a little bit of imagination. Can you imagine your way into the ground you're standing on and imagine there's an energy wave? And if people really can't get it, I say it's a deep energy wave. It's big and deep and slow like this. Imagine it. And as you breathe in, imagine that energy coming through the soles of your feet into your body. The exhale is neutral. You breathe it in and you feel it. You breathe it in and you feel it. So you're bringing the world into you.
Beautiful.
Yeah. One other thing I want to mention is our physical eyes. Look at us with our glasses and our computer screens.
Let's take it off, huh? I'll take it off.
Seriously, seriously. I don't let people wear glasses when they're doing energy exercises because these little frames of ours, they diminish our peripheral vision. So we get sort of tunnel vision. They diminish the natural saccadic movement of the eyeball. This rapid, tiny little movements. This is what gives us clear vision, because if our eyes are moving around, we pick up more detail. And the more frozen our eyeballs get, the less detail we have. So the fuzzier the world gets. Yeah.
Wow.
Plus, when we're focused through our physical eyeballs, we're taking energy. All our awareness is here. Energy is here. Your eyeballs and your optic nerve are right underneath your frontal lobes and your prefrontal cortex, where we think. We think and we reason and we figure and we do not feel.
And then we will have a lot of problems because thinking creates most of the crap that people feel.
Exactly. And so we do a lot of eye exercises. There's a book called Yoga for Your Eyes. I think the author is Meyer Schneider. I think that's right. It's Yoga for Your Eyes. So I'm sure you can get it on Amazon, and that's my source. I use his exercises for, if we loosen up our eyeballs, we loosen up our consciousness, and we loosen up our awareness.
I love that, because that's the problems that I normally work with daily. People's thinking that created all these emotional patterns. That's what I kind of free them from. That's me coming with bringing back that kind of self-worth. Do you see, because you know, I'm coming from the self-worth point of view, do you see a lot of your clients having those issues around self-worth? And
absolutely. Oh my God, it's a talk about a pandemic. Really, it's a real pandemic of lack of self-worth, lack of awareness of our own value, our beauty, our power. In Western culture, we've like thrown it out, we've flushed it out of people. And I really think that that sense of self-worth, it comes from being connected. If you're separated, if you're taught that, okay, you're on your own, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which is impossible if you've ever tried it. You know, this individuation thing that we do, we've individuated our way out of healthy collectivity.
Yeah.
And if you don't get feedback, you have no idea who you are. Everything we know is by a feedback, isn't it?
Yeah, so true. And the system, unfortunately, as far as I see on this planet, is really manufacturing victims, and false identities are just planted into the mind, that then those seeds start to grow. And people don't even know who they are.
They don't know who they are, and their awareness is trapped in the part of the brain where the ego structure resides, and the ego structure and the limbic system are very close together and mirror one another all the time. And if your awareness gets trapped in that part of the brain, this is that self-referential state. Everything's about me, and I don't have connection to the world, so I have to defend against these things that I don't understand. So the limbic system is constantly firing and putting us into sympathetic dominance, contracted states. And people end up in that part of the brain only able to reference their own emotional responses. And, you know, what's really important is, I think for your work and my work, is helping people understand that emotions are responses to experience. And we need our awareness out in the world to understand what the experience actually is.
Yeah, it's beautiful how you say it. My mentor says sometimes, and I love this example, that what if life is an actual mansion and there are these beautiful doors with opportunities, and along the early years of life, mostly, we started to shut the doors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we end up in this small version of life, and we see no opportunities, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller as there's more referentials coming back to that ego self.
Yeah, exactly. And I call it, I refer to it as a little closet we get stuck in. And in that part of the brain, what's really kind of horrific is if our awareness gets caught in that very small part of the brain. It has a function, it's a very important part of our brain, but if that's the only thing we know, that part of the brain is not wired directly to the outside world.
Yeah, in no way. And it becomes a survival rather than thriving and connecting and really, because I believe that's a big one, is that once one comes out of that box, then they will start to connect to self and others. There's all the space opening up, creativity, tapping into life purpose, who I am, what am I here for, and there is a charged life.
Exactly. When we step out of the box, we have awareness once again in our sensing systems. We step away from emotional response and into our direct sensing, and we get flooded with all those beautiful things you just named, because the world is speaking to us. The world says, this is your passion. The world says, this is the reason we brought you here. The world says, this is your belonging. And you have to feel it. You cannot figure it out. You have to feel it.
And the funny part is this, I believe that it's been always talking to us. It's been provided long times ago. It's been abundant from day one.
Yeah.
We tend to limit ourselves and not having filtered it out. It's what the mind does.
Yeah. And, I want to say this again, that when we're born, we don't know how to do this. Right? When we're born, we're learning a lot of stuff. We got a lot of data to put into our tiny little bodies, and we're busy getting our physiology going and all that stuff. But we reach a certain age, we have to be trained and mentored in how to connect to the world. And it's beyond socialization. Everybody says you have to socialize your kids. Well, we have to bring our children into relationship with the larger world, with larger powers, with the magic of nature, the wonder of the universe, not just the human world.
Would you say, I'm just wondering, would you say that, I understand that there's a lot of things happening in childhood, but would it be fair to say that when children kind of are born, they have this?
Yeah.
Then it starts to just disintegrate, and that ego comes in, and probably wounded parents with their trauma and with their all crap brought into family. Generational, I do work with that, and then they just lose themselves to these limiting.
Yeah. We have generation after generation, 2,000 years worth of generations of parents who had lost these critical teachings of what it means to be human in the larger scheme of life. And the wisdom is lost. So if we come back to the infant, yes, we're born with the capacity for all this. We're born with the seeds of all this knowledge. But again, being human is complicated. When we learn language, we're the only species that has this capacity for language the way we do, right? It's extraordinary, this thing that we've developed. But to learn language, to learn to speak the way a human speaks, we have to completely shift the speed at which we process information. We have to literally slow down 10,000 times a factor of 10,000. We're slowing down and slowing down and slowing down to learn language.
Mm.
And that shifts where our awareness is. And to be human, we need language. This is a required part of being human, apparently. And so that slowing down to learn language and learn to communicate through speech and song and poetry and all that stuff, it's beautiful. But then we also have to pick up the connection to the world again. If we just come into the language level of consciousness, we are leaving a lot behind, right? Yes, we have to wire all these parts of our brain and get the prefrontal cortex going and all that stuff, but we have to go back and be sure our whole sensing system is still wired into the world. So there is a tremendous amount of mentoring that most adults living today have not received.
Yes, because I mean, yeah, I've learned a lot about myself too, that I've been carrying these survival patterns. My family went back to 2 world wars in Europe, and they do touch lives today. The lack mentality of Eastern Europe or Central Europe, where I'm coming from, is so prevalent. This kind of generational trauma is carried over to hopefully survive, but of course it doesn't really help a lot of people. It's rather than holding them back from experiencing connection and abundance, because it becomes a shield that I have to protect what I could get, because they will take it. And that did happen. All the changes.
And the memory of this and the patterning of this, it's not just our thought patterns that get passed from one generation to the next. This gets into, really, to me, it gets into the protoplasmic level of being human. This is passed at a really deep level. Some people talk about epigenetics, but there's a kind of body memory at a mystical level where the memories of trauma and how to survive are passed on and passed on and passed on. And it's not that people have bad intent or anything, but there's a body of wisdom about recovering from trauma that we need to regain. And I think this is your work. This is definitely my work. And we're not going to be able to heal everybody, but we do need a certain number of adults who are alive and well now to have the courage to reclaim what I call full consciousness, where we're not just surviving, but we remember how to thrive. And we need some of those adults to be teaching the children again. It's going to take several generations to recover the full beauty and wisdom of our being human.
I've got very interesting experiences these last few months. I see wide range of age groups popping up, from age 10, 12 to even in the 60s, 70s and 80s, coming to me and asking for actually releasing this kind of limiting patterns of behavior and emotions. Do you have similar wide range?
Yes, a very wide range. I only work with people in their mid-30s onward, but people come to me asking about their children more and more, and asking about people who are just into their 20s more and more. And the way I understand this is that over the last, I would say, 20 years, there has been a change in the field of consciousness. In the whole planet's field of consciousness. And, so many people are so depressed. Oh, it's so awful in the world. I say, no, it's not awful. The field of consciousness is changing. And you and I see it by more people getting that. Where does that feeling come from? This is that protoplasmic level, that in our very organism, there is a memory of the healed state. And if we feel it, we may not know what it is, but we will want it.
Mm.
And so we go seeking, and we'll start to recognize that certain patterns take us away from the healed state. And so we want to do something about those patterns. So this is what I think is actually happening, is that consciousness with a capital C is on the move, and it's evolving, and we ought to have faith in that.
Wow. And what I see is a large amount of people are resisting to it, and they are lagging and lagging behind. They don't realize that this lack of growth mindset or openness to learn new ways of thinking, new ways of relating to the world is creating bigger and bigger all kinds of traumas, problems in their life, because they think they somehow graduated from life at high school or university, and that's never been the case.
Yeah, well, I have a few theories about that. If we take a person who is emotionally defended against the world, their limbic fear circuit tells them everything's dangerous, and I can't do that, I'm going to just stay by myself and all that stuff. This business of the limbic fear circuit firing is primordial. We developed organisms, biological organisms developed the limbic system when they were roaming the savannah and trying to keep their babies from being eaten by saber-toothed tigers. And the mama would take her babies out and say, yeah, you hear that rustle in the grass, that's the saber-toothed tiger. So the limbic system takes that one sound wave and pads it like 100 sound waves on either side, and anything within that huge range will trigger the limbic fear circuit. And that is fight or flight.
Yeah,
that is instantly disconnecting, get out of Dodge, as we say in America here. Right? That is so powerful. It's so powerful. And when I am defended against the world, if my limbic system is telling me defend, 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 my awareness is not in the world, it's inside myself. I am not getting any data from the world. And I can get to the point, if I'm so defended, that any energy coming to me from the world will trigger my defenses even more. The limbic system does not distinguish between love and hate, good and bad. It just is tracking energy. Yeah. And if I have so much energy held in my armoring, I need a little bit left to run my heart and my lungs. And anything else coming at me, I can't take it in because I'm using all my biological energy. So I shove the world away. And this gets really severe. And this is why you see people just jammed into this defensive state, and people get quite radical in those states. I think we're seeing this collectively in a lot of places in the world. We're seeing this in governance even. It's a terrible thing. It's what Wilhelm Reich called the emotional plague, where people just have forgotten how to process life, how to be connected, how to move through challenges. And so the defenses become so severe that there's only right or wrong. And excuse me, my way is the right way. So get out of here. It's like,
yeah, I mean, so beautifully, you put it so beautifully that then when this person becomes just this black and white, this life and death, with me or against me type of patterns of thinking. And what I discover a lot, that apparently these people have invested their life force into all of these limitations, and at times you want to help them, and I just put this question in my Facebook groups that, when you challenge them, they defend their own limitation. They've got 100 stories to back it up.
But you have to remember that defended state, if somebody's really triggered, the limbic fear circuit releases a whole bunch of monoamines in the brainstem. Yeah. And these neurotransmitters are designed to take over the entire brain system. So you're only focused on the danger. Yeah. So this is neurophysiology at work, and you can't think your way out of it.
So true. Yeah.
You have to feel something. something has to crack through so you feel there might be a different way.
I love how
And
you
some
say,
people, Mhm.
because that's how I approach these
Yeah.
kind of limiting behaviors
Yeah.
as well. But I believe the code to actually crack it
Mhm.
is emotion, or the emotional pattern that sort of supports it, or like a glue that
Mhm.
keeps it there for
Mhm.
people.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And how do we find you? How do we know where you are, or how can people seek out you on the internet, social media, or what is the way to get to you?
All right. If anyone is interested in talking to me about training, the best thing to do is email me.
Hmm.
And that's very easy. It's Marti Spiegelman at mac.com. So just contact me directly. I don't take very many people, but I always interview people who are interested. So that's number one. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find my TEDx talk on my LinkedIn page. That's a talk where I basically put out all the principles that underlie the work that I do with people. So that's a really good thing to look at. There are also a number of web pages. So if you Google my name, you'll find Shaman's Light webpage, which is the big training program. My large training program is basically open-ended, and most people stay with me for 10 years or more. So that's the big initiation program. The introduction to that big program is called Precision Consciousness. And there's a webpage called yourprecisionconsciousness.com, yourprecisionconsciousness.com, that talks about that first year of training. There's also a webpage called technologiesofconsciousness.com, which talks a little bit about the overview principles. In addition, I have a podcast that I do with my colleague here in the States, Todd Hoskins, and that is called Leading from Being. And the website for that is leadingfrombeing.com.
Wow. I mean, I will just ask you to give me all of that, and I will put it under the video so people can find it. It will be nice and easy. What else would you want to share? What have we not covered? Is there any more gold nuggets in you that you can't hold back now? I know there's a lot, but
oh my God, there is so much.
tiny ones to share.
Yeah, well, I want to share a metaphor that I use with my students all the time, because the world is such a mess now, and there are more and more people who want to do something. They want to optimize their lives. They want to, what do I do? And so many people come to me and say, how do we fix this? And my answer is, you don't fix anything.
Yeah.
So the metaphor is, I have on my beautiful property here, I have forests and creeks, and I have a big wild meadow. And every year, the meadow, the grasses come up, they're green, they're lush, it's really beautiful. And then they die off when the rains go, and they get all brown, and the brown grass lays down in a big mess on the earth. And the next season comes, and the new grasses come up. Do they stop to fix the old grass? Do they paint it green and prop it up so it looks like new grass? No. The new grass comes right up through the old grass. It's still grass, but it's a new generation. It just does its thing. And what we need to do in the world today is that we need to be the new grass in the meadow. We need to just do our thing. Don't worry about what is broken. If it's broken, if it's coming apart, that's a timing that needs to end. Everything has a cycle, a timing, and it needs to complete, because if it doesn't complete, the next timing cannot start. So we need to learn to be the new grass, just come up and do our thing, a new thing. Don't worry about fixing old things.
Well, that's beautiful to see how you worded this, that I think if one is aware, one is on purpose, then we just need to love that chaos that's taking place at times, and we'll move past that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Marti,
absolutely.
I loved connecting with you, and
Likewise.
I will hope to catch up with you again. And thank you very much for your time.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, my honor. Thank you, Andre, so much.
Thanks.